another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. Jesus Christ died and he rose again. Let's go ahead and get into it. Well, exactly before we get into it, I just want to say thank you to all my subscribers and may God bless you all. Okay? I really appreciate you and may God bless you all. Okay. So, here we go. Okay, so yeah, start right here. Okay, cool. So the 86 Rockets, okay, went 51-31, made it through the first couple of rounds of the Western Conference playoffs, and made it to the Western Conference Finals, okay? And so Hakeem Olajuwon early on in his career had a reputation of being an angry man, okay? He was being an angry player, okay? And so they kept referencing during the Lakers series on the broadcast where, I think it was Game 6 versus Denver, where he got thrown out after putting his hands on a referee, okay? He got thrown out after putting his hands on a referee, okay? And Houston won that game, okay? So they won that game, right? They won that game. So Olajuwon was known to have a bit of a temper. He also, in his rookie year, they were playing the Jazz in the playoffs in 1985. And he was playing against Billy Paultz, okay? A lot of y'all may not know who Billy Paultz is. He used to be, they called him the Whopper. Billy Paultz, the Whopper. Ironically, he used to be a center for the Houston Rockets. But now he's playing for the Utah Jazz, right? In 1985. And they're playing the Rockets in the first round. So Paultz and Olajuwon are lined up against each other. And Olajuwon just hits him in his face. And so, Hakeem Olajuwon was known to have a temper early on in his career. So, they're playing the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, 1986, and they're up 3-1 versus the Lakers, and they go back to Los Angeles for Game 5, and it's getting very tense. It's getting very heated because the Lakers are on their ropes. They don't want to be eliminated. They're playing with a sense of desperation. So they're going to do everything that they can to win the game. And even if it means some confrontations, then that's probably what it's going to take. Okay? So I remember Lewis Lloyd and Michael Cooper had a confrontation early on in the first quarter. Okay? And then there were a couple of other confrontations that took place. Ralph Sampson and Maurice Lucas. And then the big confrontation happened. Okay. I'm gonna show y'all the mini confrontation that first took place between Sampson and Maurice Lucas. Okay. Here it goes right here. Wiggins is open. Doesn't have the shooting. Sampson is fouled and gets the basket. Has to be held away from Lucas. It's holding Sampson away. That's a good thing for Ralph. He never made contact with Luke. He would have been out of this game. Okay, you're going to see it. And Sampson gets the rebound. And there's Lucas with the hard foul. Sampson doesn't like it at all, to say the least. And Olajuwon heads up, pushing him out, his own teammate, to make sure he doesn't get thrown out of the game. Hakeem is the only guy that could do that to Ralph, I think. Oh, boy, what an elbow in the face. He got McCray to level. Okay, here it is, the big confrontation.
Sampson trying to get in. And Tommy, the officials are going to have a very difficult decision. Because if you're going to throw out two players and they're named Kupchak and Hakeem Olajuwon, Bill Fitch, temperature may rise a few degrees. There's no question that Olajuwon threw a punch or two. What precipitated it, I don't know. The better part of valor is to leave both of them play, and that's normally what happens. Let's watch Kupchak at this left of your screen. They've been fighting Olajuwon the entire time, and Olajuwon took the first shot at him, and Kupchak comes back. But look at that gutsy referee, boy, right in and took Olajuwon off his feet. Was that Earl Strum? That was the best block out of the night. I think it was. Rockets are being escorted, many of them back to their bench. Many of them are still at midcourt. Everyone's going to have to cool down before this game resumes. This series has expected from the Lakers. They are using right now as many big people as they can to try and wear on Olajuwon. He's got a little frustrated. They got physical with him. Protected Olajuwon and Kupchak. Hakeem Olajuwon has been ejected. So has Mitch Kupchak.
Yeah, so that was the big confrontation that cost Hakeem Olajuwon his second ejection in the 1986 playoffs. Remember, I mentioned he had the one against Denver, okay, where he got thrown out for putting his hands on one of the referees, right? Okay, and so Olajuwon gets thrown out. Then Ralph Sampson hits the incredible shot that defeats the Lakers. Okay, and what they as I'm watching as I watch Game 5 of the '86 Western Conference Finals, they don't show the part where Byron Scott missed a jumper and Allen Level grabbed the rebound and called timeout with 1 second left. They cut that part out, which is I don't get. Okay, which is something I don't get, because why would you cut that part out? Byron Scott missing a jumper, and then Allen Level calling timeout with 1 second left. They cut that part out, which I don't get. But oh well. Anyway, so yeah, so they get to the '86 finals, okay, and John Lucas, who is in a much better place today than he was back in his career. John Lucas had 2 stints in rehab between 1984 and 1986, okay? And he was suspended in '85, came back in '86, okay? Then the Rockets were boarding a flight from Oakland to fly to Seattle, okay? And Hank McDowell, who was on that '86 team, said, we kept waiting for John to come out, and he never showed because the bus pulled off without John. And Hank McDowell was like, he relapsed again, okay? So John Lucas relapsed. And so Bill Fitch held a meeting, okay? And he said basically he can do a couple of things. He can keep John Lucas on the team and make sure he stays clean for the rest of the season. or we can suspend him and get him help. And so Robert Reed and Allen Level were the two senior members of the Rockets at that time. Okay, they were the longest tenured Rockets on the team. Okay, and so Robert Reed and Allen Level raised their hand and said they want John Lucas to go to rehab. Okay, and so he went to rehab, and of course, today, today, he's a life coach, and I believe he's also a assistant coach too. So he's both. So he's playing both roles. Okay, as a life coach and a assistant basketball coach. Okay, and so they made it all the way to the '86 finals without him, and they had Robert Reed running the point, but Lucas got suspended. Okay, then Allen Level stepped in, and he's playing well. Then Allen Level breaks his wrist. Allen Level breaks his wrist, right? And so Bill Fitch moves Robert Reed to point guard. Okay, and so Reed at that time was the sixth man. Okay, so but John Lucas suspended. Allen Level broke his wrist. He was out for an extended period of time. It made sense to move Robert Reed over to a starter at point guard. Okay, and Reed was in the running for the sixth man of the year at that time. Okay, so but they made it to the '86 finals, and not having John Lucas caught up with them. Okay, and so John Lucas said they just didn't have enough movement and versatility at the point guard. Okay. Robert Reed said he couldn't get those 12 assists easily like John Lucas could and still get his 12 points. Robert Reed said he could get the Rockets into their offense, but he wasn't matching, not hot shifty. Okay, that was from Robert Reed saying that he could get them into their offense, but he wasn't shifty like Magic. Okay, so not having John Lucas hurt them versus the Celtics, and it hurt them badly because they needed John Lucas to settle him down. Okay, and so there was also the brawl that took place in Game 5 between Jerry Seasting and Rahal Sampson. Okay, and Craig Elo, who was the 12th man on that Rockets team. Okay, the same Craig Elo who is remembered for Michael Jordan, right? But Craig Elo was the 12th man on the Rockets at that time, and he came off the bench and he bought a towel to Dennis Johnson because Dennis Johnson was bleeding, and Craig Elo lost a lot of money because he had left the bench area. Okay, so so there are some people who said the Rockets had gotten in over their heads versus the Celtics. Okay, and even the Celtics. Okay, were saying they were looking at the Houston Rockets like this team right here. Man, hell no. That's what the Celtics were thinking. Okay. As a matter of fact, Kevin McHale said that. Kevin McHale said he took a look at that Rockets team and he was like, "This team right here? No way, no way." Right? Okay. And so James Worthy, James Worthy watched the '86 finals. Okay, he obviously watched the '86 finals between the Rockets and the Lakers, and he had this to say. He said Houston's goal was to beat the Lakers. When they faced Boston, they just seemed to lose their composure a little bit. It's just like in '84 Boston kind of took us off our tracks with their physical play. I don't think they were ready for that. They didn't have anybody on that team that really had that experience other than the coach himself, Bill Fitch. Sampson was just totally distracted. They could never find their game. Okay. That's what James Worthy said about the 86 finals. Okay. And I remember watching the games on YouTube, the 86 finals. Okay. And Larry Bird just completely clowned him. Okay. Larry Bird just completely clowned the Houston Rockets. Okay. Or should I say, the Celtics as a team clowned the Houston Rockets. Now, there were some moves that Larry Bird made in game 2 that completely clowned the Rockets. Okay. He individually clowned the Rockets himself. Okay. And so I'm like, yeah, this is why I consider the 86 Celtics the greatest team of all time. Okay. One of the best the 86 Celtics, the greatest passing team of all time. Okay. Greatest team of all time, greatest passing team of all time. Right. And so after the 86 finals, it was widely believed among many Houston players that it would be them and the Lakers battling out in the West. Okay. And so, but then, Lewis Lloyd and Mitchell Wiggins, they got kicked out for drug violations. Okay. They got kicked out for drug violations, and that basically killed their careers right there. Okay. Because, Lewis Lloyd and Mitchell Wiggins, they got banned for about 2.5 years. Yeah. They got banned for about 2.5 years because they got suspended during the 86-87 season. Okay. And there were players saying that John Lucas should have been a cautionary tale. Okay. And so Robert Reed, Mitchell Wiggins, and Lewis Lloyd believed they were set up. Okay. Because obviously Wiggins and Lloyd went to a club. Okay. And then the next day at practice, Horace Ballmer, the head of NBA security, was there. Okay. And so, Wiggins and Lloyd, their careers were basically over after those drugs suspensions. Okay. And there were other players who were suspended for less, who had drug violations who was suspended for less. But they got banned for 2.5 years. Okay. And it basically killed their careers. Okay. Now, Wiggins did come back in 1990 to the Rockets. Lewis Lloyd came back to the Rockets in 1990, but just wasn't the same. And it basically killed the Rockets as a championship contender because by 1989, that team was completely dismantled. Okay. And so, Robert Reed made a joke that Rodney McCray was standing on one side and Jim Peterson was standing on the one side of the team picture, okay, of the Houston Rockets 1988-89 team picture, okay. And Robert Reed made a joke that says, you know what that means, right? You get hit and traded. I'm like, huh? You get hit and traded, yeah. And so, lo and behold, Rodney McCray and Jim Peterson are traded to Sacramento, okay, shortly before the 89 season. And the season before, Ralph Sampson signed a new deal, okay? And Steve Patterson, the GM at that time, said, we're never going to trade Ralph Sampson, okay? He just signed a new deal, okay, before the start of the 1988 season. Well, 19 games into the season, they traded Sampson and Steve Harris, a backup guard on the Rockets. They traded Sampson and Steve Harris to the Golden State Warriors for J.B. Carroll and Eric Floyd. Okay. So that was the first domino to fall. So Lucas was the first domino to fall. Then you had the suspensions of Wiggins and Lloyd. Then Sampson's traded a few games until the 88, 87, 88 season. Okay. Then Peterson and McCray are gone to Sacramento. Robert Reed gets drafted by the expansion Charlotte Hornets. Okay. Right. And so by the time the 89 season comes, that team is completely dismantled. Okay. And only Allen LeHavel, who had been there during the entire decade of the 80s, was the only Rocket from the 81 and the 86 championship teams that were still on the roster. Okay. Besides Olajuwon himself. Okay. And then Bill Fitch was gone after the 1988 season too. Okay. So that 86 team was dismantled within 2 short years. Okay. And so Ralph Sampson had bad knees, gets traded to Golden State. Ironically, he got traded to Sacramento for Jim Peterson, his old teammate. Okay. And so not many people know this, but Rodney McCray actually won an NBA championship with the Chicago Bulls. Believe it or not. Okay. He was on that 93 squad that won the NBA championship with the Bulls. Of course, Olajuwon got his too in Houston, 94, 95. But who knows what would have happened if that team was able to stay together for long periods of time, because there was some talk that they were going to be competing for the next 7, 8 years. Okay. So Houston's demise as a championship contender, of course, that opened the door for the Lakers. They were always going to be around. But that opened the door for other teams like Portland, Phoenix, Utah. And that opened the door, believe it or not, for teams like Detroit and Chicago. Okay. So the aftershocks of the dismantling of the 86 Rockets really led to other teams in the West and other teams in the East competing for championships. Okay. But who knows what could have been accomplished if that team was able to stay together for a long period of time. Okay. Just look at the Lakers and what they accomplished during the 80s. They stayed together for a very long time. Okay. So, yeah. All right. That's it. And that's all for Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am out of here. Thank you to all my subscribers. May God bless you all with me. Be blessed.